Hey, do you waste time on computer? Do you waste time on the internet? Do you waste time on social media? Do you waste time on cell phone? What about video game and TV screen? Do you eat cake and then another cake and then think, why two cakes but not no cakes? What about other kinds of cake? Do you ever stare up at the night sky and think, why am I like this? Why am I always distracted? Well, do I have the solution for you? It's called Dopamine Detox. What is a dopamine detox? What is a dopamine? What is it? Call 1-800-DOPAMINE to find out more.
Now I know my past, present, and my future.
I could check Wikipedia, but
ain't nobody got time for that.
There's only one solution. I have to rely on YouTube.com.
We're screwed.
Dopamine.
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 It's called dopamine. Dopamine is a monoamine neurotransmitter.
It's a neurotransmitter.
We all have neurotransmitters in our brain that make us feel good.
Dopamine is the chemical in our brain that creates motivation.
The motivating brain chemical.
Your brain is just a computing device that's looking at ones and zeros.
Your brain, my brain, everybody's brain.
It sees dopamine, it sees pain, and it's really just trying to say, how can I go towards the one and get away from the zero?
Dopamine is movement.
When your ancient ancestors saw the antelope frolic across the field, they got a squirt of dopamine, which motivated them to go kill it.
Dopamine is what makes us desire things.
The craving neurotransmitter.
Anytime that there's an anticipation of pleasure or a reward.
So anytime you do something, anytime you achieve something, boom, dopamine.
We live in a world of supernormal stimuli.
These apps, these things.
Things like porn, drugs, junk food, and binge-watching shows.
They trigger massive amounts of dopamine in your head for very little effort.
You will be at the mercy of companies who will play on your impulses to control you like a puppet.
Our myopic focus on the easy dopamine fix has driven us to ignore reality.
You feel anxiety all the time. You feel
creatively and mentally bogged down.
Felt like I was plugged in and didn't know who I was. Not happy. Let me rephrase. Moody.
Things that used to excite you no longer excite you like they used to.
Why aren't we motivated to do the things that would significantly advance us?
Business.
Is there a way to make doing difficult things easy?
And that's where the dopamine detox comes in. The dopamine detox.
Dopamine Detox.
Dopamine detox.
Dopamine Detox.
Dopamine fasting.
It's essentially a fast from dopamine-inducing activity.
Anything that stimulates some sort of pleasure.
Get it out of there.
So this means no food, no phone.
iPhone. Second iPhone.
No TV, no video games.
No TikTok or funny YouTube videos.
Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram.
No excessive reading.
No alcohol, no weed, no drugs, no cigarettes.
No processed sugars like candies and junk food.
No excessive socialization.
No talking to anyone.
No pornography.
No masturbating.
No excessive motorcycle use.
Don't do anything fun. Don't eat any food, I think. I'm not sure. Why would anyone do that?
You're going to embrace boredom.
and you decide for how long you're going to detox it.
You only need to do it one day.
A day of doing nothing.
Thus allowing your brain to get extremely interested in the only thing you want to get done. It's going to be work.
Dopamine. See, what junk food does is it's mechanically engineered to be as high fat, high calorie as possible.
Your brain naturally goes to whatever is going to give you the most dopamine.
It's going to start with you checking a Facebook post.
You play the video games, you jerk off, put on the Netflix.
And then you're going to start checking Twitter, and you're going to be like, oh, I wonder what people are saying in their news feeds.
Now the brain is in dopamine mode.
When you see a notification pop up,
every time you see that comment,
you're getting blasted with artificial amounts of dopamine that no human was ever meant to experience.
Your mind and your thoughts are being polluted all day by the renegade dances that you keep seeing on TikTok.
Dopamine.
Go to www.something.com and see
something kind of stimulating and naughty.
Porn, excessive porn, penis circumference.
Great ass! You're getting a look at your hog.
And now you're having sex with your hand.
Dopamine.
And it's the dopamine that is getting us high.
How dopamine works is that it works just like alcohol.
Dopamine.
Dopamine is digital heroin.
And it's lifting us up to a heightened state.
Dopamine.
I like to view it like a musical conductor. Digital heroin.
Dopamine.
As we continue to flood our brain with dopamine,
flooding our brains with unnaturally high amounts of dopamine, a huge amount of dopamine.
A huge amount of dopamine.
Massive amount of dopamine.
Massive hit of dopamine.
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 Dopamine detox.
You gotta get bored.
Dopamine detox.
Works like magic.
Dopamine detox.
To step out of your little hobbit hole.
Dopamine detox. These people, they told me to do it.
Dopamine.
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 Dopamine detox.
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 That's all you have to do!
Billions of dollars are being spent by massive corporations.
Big companies motivating you to go grab that reward. Dopamine.
That's just the society that we're living in.
We live in a society. We live in a society.
We have reprogrammed our brain.
Billions of dollars.
Billions and billions.
Trillions.
Billions.
Billion.
Big companies.
Corporations.
Society.
Dopamine.
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 The apps, the cell phones,
Salty foods.
Social media.
Sugar.
Ice cream cone.
Big McChicken.
Beautiful potato chip.
The broken is also cursed.
Junk food.
CSGO. Video games.
TV.
Caffeine. Capitalistic.
Billions.
Trillions.
Porn.
Hog.
Boobies.
He looks at his penis
5 hours a day.
Spanking the monkey nude in the street.
Flood our brain.
Flooding our brain, huge amount.
Huge.
Massive amount.
Massive hit.
Dopamine.
Dopamine.
So like if you keep doing something too much,
No! God!
eventually there's
Trillions.
Billions.
a dopamine up, right?
No! God, please, no!
And you're kind of screwed up for life.
No!
Detox.
No!
Dopamine.
No!
I'm trying to say is, gathering my thoughts here, is that everyone should do a dopamine detox and dopamine fast. It's as simple as that.
Wow. So there you go. Dopamine is basically digital heroin. It's like alcohol. You got John Williams in your brain motivating you to go kill Bambi or love Bambi. In the before times, we needed to survive and reproduce. But now, in current year, giant corporations want you to like, comment, and subscribe on all their stimulating products. All these stimulating things give your brain dopamine, and you just go cuckoo for dopamine. Because your brain doesn't care, it just wants that good old dopamine, baby. So all these dopamine things are putting your dopamine levels through the roof. Doing anything productive or hard work, it's super hard. Super hard. Because it doesn't give you as much dopamine as
Tasty donut!
That's why you're unfulfilled. That's why you can't get anything done. You got poopy brain. The cure for all of that is a dopamine detox or a dopamine fast. Because if 2020 is to be remembered by nothing else, it's dopamine fasting. And nothing else. Even though these videos share a lot of their talking points about dopamine and detoxing, they can vary in their approach and application. The types of stimulation to reduce, if not all of them. How long? It can be viewed as a one-day challenge, a permanent lifestyle change, or a tool to help one become a Chad of action and exclaim to the heavens, "My name is Raymond Holt and my brain is rock hard."
My brain shouldn't be hard. If anything, I'll say I am Raymond Holt and my brain is soft and wet.
Trick your brain, reset your mind, overcome addiction, God mode level willpower, unfair advantage. This whole phenomenon operates in the overlapping realms of self-help, personal development, entrepreneur, business, go-getter types, motivational, discipline, time management, brain hackers, spirituality, woo-woo, being present, being mindful, being zen. Hey, it's me, Alan Watts. I'm walking here. All this with a foundation in brain science and how dopamine works. Results may vary. Look, I'm just trying to have a bit of fun here. I got no beef. Anything I say with love. There is some good information and good advice scattered throughout these videos. But there's also a lot of, "Are you sure about that?" It's like a big puzzle full of all these puzzle pieces. It's up to you, piece together the good, discard the rest. To show you what I mean, first you got professional woke empty house business boy Alex Becker. Number 2, you got professional soft-spoken starry-eyed. You ever like go outside and you look at a tree and you think, wow, that's a tree. Nathaniel Drew. Alex's problem was that he wasn't working hard enough on his business. He went super minimalistic.
I could only work 12 hours a day, and then I'm like, what am I gonna do with my time?
Then he felt like he was spending all his free time playing Smash, going on Facebook,
And yada yada yada, I'm really tired today.
My brain got obsessed with these dopamine triggers and all the things that used to be really beneficial to me, particularly working on my business, reading every single day, watching CEO interviews.
It all impacted his motivation to listen to more CEO interviews. So he cut out all the strong hits of dopamine, like removing social media from his phone, Smash, cleaned up his diet.
My diet consists of oatmeal, spinach, chicken, olive oil.
And then after a few days, he started to enjoy doing the hard stuff. Business.
Watching CEO interviews.
Nathaniel, on the other hand, felt like he was being overworked mentally and he needed a break.
I think this is a consequence of an addiction that I have to productivity.
He saw it as a Vipassana meditation retreat. He didn't eat all day, he meditated a lot, he slept like 10 hours.
That is a long time.
He goes on walks, he sees his friends, he's very present and in the moment and just like, I'm enjoying my life. Wow, isn't it great? He basically used the whole day to help clear his head, and he gained a greater appreciation
of some of the incredible things that we have, like unlimited access to the world's music whenever I want it.
Needed more chill, needed more motivation. Less productivity, more productivity. 10 hours of sleep, 12 hours to work on business. Both are dopamine detoxes and yet so very different. They both have good ideas like reduce distractions, eat healthy, practice gratitude. Then you also get this.
Look at what reality really is. 70% of our lives is built around poisonous behavior.
The world is infectious.
Most people spend their time watching TV, doing dumb stuff, putting crap in their body. They're completely out of control.
At least Nathaniel's got the right idea.
I want to make it abundantly clear that I am not a health expert in any way. I'm just a kid on the internet. So I'm not recommending that you do any of this without doing your own research.
So I did. Look, not a science guy, barely got through grade 11 chemistry, and barely keep continuity. That didn't stop me. Go to Wikipedia, read up some information. There's a source. You read the source paper, and guess what? More sources. Then you go to the source's source and discover that there are even more sources. So you go read those sources, and then you check those sources to find even more sources. And shit, guess what? More sources. Journals, essays, books. What? Endless sources. It never ends. What's reputable? What's not? I don't know. Welcome to my epistemological nightmare. I've lost my mind.
Many hours later.
I did it. I got my degree from Dopamine University. Now I'm as qualified as everyone else.
Water, fire, air, and dirt.
Neurotransmitters.
How do they work?
Despite their state-of-the-art, highly advanced graphics, these dopamine detox videos don't get into the details of what neurotransmitters do.
What it do, baby?
Yeah, you already know. Yeah. Neurons, or nerve cells, are the building blocks that comprise our nervous systems. Neurons share the same basic makeup as our other cells, but they have electrochemical mojo that lets them transmit messages to each other.
They do this when either stimulated by a sensory input
Something was said. Not good.
or triggered by neighboring neurons. It's a very localized message between one neuron and another neuron. Technically, dopamine can also be a neuromodulator, but we don't care about that right now. So a neuron picks up the signal, activating what's known as the action potential, which sends the signal down the neuron. There are these little sacs of neurotransmitters, and they're just hanging out. But then the signal causes these sacs to fuse with the cell membrane and release neurotransmitters into what's called the synaptic gap. They then bind to receptors on the postsynaptic neuron, and depending on the receptor, it will pass the message along or just not. The chemicals then debind from the receptor sites and they get removed from the synaptic gap through either reuptake, the breaking down of enzymes, or sent away from the synapse by diffusion. So all neurotransmitters, they all go through this basic cycle of release, binding, receptor activation, reuptake, and all this causes you to think, feel, emote, and be alive. The thing is though, sometimes a single chemical can have different effects on the postsynaptic neuron depending on which receptor it binds to, because the cell has many different types of receptors on it. Dopamine alone has like D1, D2, D3. Depending on which receptors it binds to, it can either excite or inhibit. And that's without mentioning the effects of all the other neurotransmitters that you have.
New York's hottest club is
human brain.
This place has everything.
Dopamine, GABA, serotonin.
A shaved lion that looks like Mario Batali.
You have like over 100, and they're all going off, doing things. What I'm trying to say is, it gets complicated. Keep that in mind for later. In the land of dopamine, you have two seemingly overlapping theories of how dopamine works. You have incentive salience, and you have reward prediction error. I always feel the need to put an asterisk next to anything I say. Working on it. This is Kent Berridge. Him and his colleague Terry Robinson wrote the OG paper on incentive salience. This paper goes hard. So they started off years ago thinking that dopamine was a mechanism for liking. As it turns out, not really. In the laboratory, they blocked the dopamine function in rats and found that they still experience pleasure liking, just not wanting. The brain seems to make a big distinction between its mechanisms of wanting something and its mechanisms of liking that same thing.
And basically what incentive salience is a certain type of wanting for a reward. It's cue-triggered wanting, triggered by Pavlovian cues for rewards and by the unconditioned rewards itself.
So you eat a donut. I love it. That's hedonic activation. Pleasure. You got that donut at the old Timmy hole. So next time you see that big old building and big old Timmy's logo, you go, I want it all. That's associated learning. The attribution of incentive salience makes these reward cues attractive. The cues become motivational magnets that trigger a temporary peak of desire to obtain or consume an associated reward. It's not quite cognitive wanting, but it's more tied to the mesolimbic dopamine systems. Also, depending on your physiological state, certain cues can become more salient, so you're more sensitive to food cues when you're really hungry, rather than if you just ate a big meal. Also, there's a concept of sensitization. I can't say. How you say it?
Sensitized.
I'll get to that later. That's incentive salience. So you can like a thing, but if you don't want it, now you get to talk about reward prediction error. I like this a lot more because you get to talk about monkeys. Yeah, monkeys. So there's this guy, Wolfram Schultz, and he did the experiments on the monkeys. These experiments involve training monkeys to hit levers to get juice, but I'm gonna change it to seeing a light, pressing a button and getting a banana, because that's more fun. The first time the monkey hit the button and got a banana, it was like... When the monkey pressed the button the second, third, fourth, fifth time and got the same banana, now the response was... But when the monkey pressed the button and got no banana... You can think of it like Pokemon cards. Based on the cues, if you get less reward than what's expected, you get a negative error. If a reward is predicted and the reward occurs, there's zero error and the spike in dopamine accompanies the predictive stimulus. But if you get an unexpected reward or a greater than expected reward, these spikes in dopamine contribute to reward learning by coding errors in the prediction of reward. So the monkey is learning, hey, if I see this light and I press this button, I'll get a banana. But if one day they get 2 banana, then they'll probably think, hey, that light, that button, it's pretty dope. But if one day they get no banana, they might be like, what the hell, bro? And lose interest in the light and button pressing.
Come on, 75 for 10,000, $10,000.
Now, when you think reward, you think donuts and bananas and Pokemon cards. Well, there is no consistent scientific meaning to the word reward. In many cases, the term reward refers to all aspects of pleasure, learning, approach behavior. It gets confusing. A reward is any object or event that generates approach behavior and consumption, produces learning of such behavior, and is an outcome of decision making. As an aspect of reward, pleasure provides a definition of reward. However, while all pleasurable stimuli are rewarding, not all rewarding stimuli are pleasurable. I'm not feeling anything. Dopamine can be seen as rewarding behavior, but reward here simply means increasing the probability of the same behavior in the same context in the future, not providing an experience of pleasure.
Yes, hello. I was wondering if you could play that song again.
Reward prediction error system gets shortened to reward system, but you can replace the word reward with the word outcome and it makes no difference to the theory. Yet by calling it the reward system, you think the words prediction and error are the key. Dopamine is a prediction error system. But wait, there's more! Dopamine is complicated. It functions in the brain in different ways, with different receptor types, and firing patterns operating on different time scales. But also you have to consider where the neuroactive chemicals are in the brain. Those chemicals are being released in very specific places, traveling very short distances, and having their effects on very specific brain regions. But my car go vroom vroom very far if I put more gas into it.
Of course!
What if you just filled up the front seat all with the gas? Front seat still in the car. Your car probably won't go any further. The gas has to go to specific areas in the engine in order to have an effect. It's like that with brain chemicals. Your brain's got all these areas. The Nicholas Ackerman, the substantial nigra, the ventricle tegmentical area, dorsal part, base gang, Amy Godola. Remember earlier when I was talking about the mesolimbic dopamine pathway? And you're probably thinking, WTF? This is it. It starts with cells in the ventral tegmental area, buried deep within the middle of the brain, and it projects out to the nucleus accumbens. The mesocortical pathway projects from the VTA to the cortex, and all these guys perform a bunch of different functions, using dopamine in different ways. For example, dopamine plays a big role in starting movement, and the destruction of dopamine neurons in an area of the brain called the substantia nigra is what produces the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. So depending on where it is in the brain, dopamine can have a role in motivation, movement, reward, memory, lactation, all this stuff. Calling dopamine a whatever chemical isn't that useful until you provide a context of a specific brain pathway or process. Even then, it's not fully accurate. Your brain releases dopamine in response to a reward is a very crude summary of what's going on. I didn't even get to variables like expected value, timescales, temporal discounting. You know, real bangers like impulsivity and self-control during intemporal decision making linked to neural dynamics of reward value representation. Yeah? Well, what's the point? All these definitions and concepts. You're being a real Harvard Andy here. Point is this: when you go down to the level of dopamine, focusing in and isolating on one neurochemical, saying this is the thing, this is the reason why, you're discussing the building blocks of human experience, foundational brain processes. And with this shifting conceptual framework, the further down you go, even the language itself starts to break down. Like, I've seen dopamine be described as a feel-good chemical, or that it makes you feel good, but it's so close to pleasure and satisfaction. And I thought dopamine was not those things. What does dopamine mean?
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
No, it's not. It
gets the people going.
It's not just what drives behavior. It's what is behavior? What is wanting? What is liking? What is reward?
What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more.
But what do I know? I ain't Bill Nye.
Bill Nye the Science Guy is brought to you by the brain.
You need the Bill Nyes of the world to explain things in a way people can understand them and make science interesting, sometimes through song. Scientific concepts get simplified, and that's fine. I've even done it in this video. Dopamine is a motivation chemical that gets you to strive towards goals. It makes you want to do stuff.
You know, brains are really cool.
Anybody can get that. I understand why science gets simplified for pop culture, but then you take that and you go a bit too far. The molecule of more does more than It's like in that book, Molecule of More. It's an easily digestible book, chock full of amusing anecdotes. It's fun to read, but science is meh. The first 3 chapters are they're fine. Yeah, the other neurotransmitters get summed up into here and now. Fine, whatever. You learn some stuff about dopamine. Pretty dope. And then it goes off the rails. Like in the 4th chapter, he speculates that Isaac Newton had a mental breakdown because he had elevated levels of dopamine, but he completely neglected that. Isaac Newton probably had mercury poisoning. He has a TEDx talk where he applies the same approach to Buzz Aldrin.
But how do you top walking on the moon? If you're all dopamine all the time, that becomes a very important question. You might be able to guess what happened next. He started drinking. He became an alcoholic. He married and divorced 2 women, and eventually things got so bad, he was hospitalized on a psychiatric inpatient unit. He recovered. But for a period of time, that same chemical that lifted him up into the heavens made his life a kind of hell.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
While conservatives on average may lack some of the virtuoso talents of the dopaminergic left, they are more likely to enjoy the advantages of a strong here and now system. These include empathy and altruism. The end of humanity may be accelerated by virtual reality. The movie Avatar provides an example of someone who starts out with too much dopamine. To maximize the resources they can dig up, the mining company plans to destroy the sacred tree of souls, which is in their way. Appalled at the plan, Jake rejects his dopaminergic background, joins the here and now Navi, and then you have the rest of the movie.
I'm the king of the world!
When you view everything through the lens of dopamine, you get this book. I wrote the sequel. It's called Molecule Amor 2, Attack of the... In Season 6, Episode 6 of The Simpsons, Mr. Burns puts Homer on a dopamine detox by cutting off TV and beer.
Maybe it was doing this that caused the previous caretakers to go insane and murder their families.
Perhaps. Tell you what, we come back and everyone's slaughtered, I owe you a Coke.
Does Homer learn the value of an honest winter's work and resist dopamine-inducing activities?
Mo, give me a beer!
No, not unless you kill your family.
The dopamine detox causes Homer to go crazy and try to murder his family. With his elevated levels of dopamine, Homer almost succeeds. It's not until Lisa gives him TV that Homer achieves balance with the here and now.
Come, family. Sit in the snow with Daddy and let us all bask in television's warm, glowing, warming glow.
It's like the old saying goes, when all you have is a hammer, everything seems like a no. A better example of someone who I think balances this mainstream pop culture understanding of science with a scientific background is Dr. Andrew Huberman. He be doing all the podcasts. Lex Friedman, Rich Roll, Bro Jogan, even started his own. He's actually super interesting to listen to. And yeah, sometimes it feels like he goes into dopamine territory, probably due to the type of podcast he's on, but also I think that's because his work focuses mainly on the visual system and the autonomic nervous system. But hey, at least he mentions other neurotransmitters besides dopamine. Just remember what I said earlier. Fortunately, my degree from Dopamine University came in handy. You didn't think that Dopamine University is not a real university.
You are correct, sir.
Yo, I can see why there are so many misconceptions around dopamine. These videos frame dopamine as if it were literally a drug or like a drug.
Dopamine is a focusing drug, it's a performance enhancing drug.
And that dopamine works a lot like drinking alcohol or doing drugs.
Dopamine is digital heroin.
Or that you can literally get addicted to dopamine or develop a dopamine addiction.
You're now providing your brain with a ridiculous amount of evidence that you are addicted to dopamine and that you can't be disciplined.
Because they're looking for something else that can give you that dopamine and they're addicted to it.
Obviously, your brain is addicted to dopamine.
I was addicted to dopamine.
Extreme dopamine addiction.
Or they frame all these activities as if they were like drugs.
We have slot machines in our pockets, tobacco in our food, cocaine in the things that we watch.
I need my hit of dopamine. Can you get addicted to dopamine? Well, it ain't like drugs. Your brain already makes it.
No one's coming along and cramming dopamine in your ear or dripping it in your brain. It's all internal.
You see, he lives in you.
Dopamine is involved in literally everything you do. Every action you take, every move you make, it all involves dopamine. It's everywhere, like Jesus. Sometimes it's framed as if you're chasing dopamine or you're craving dopamine.
You're not craving ice cream or sex with a porn star. No, you're actually craving more stimulation of your reward circuitry.
or you want more dopamine. But according to incentive salience, dopamine is the wanting. You run into a very philosophical problem. Can I get into a circle? I made this handy dandy chart. You want dopamine, but dopamine is wanting. But if you want dopamine, then you have dopamine. And if you want to get it, chase after dopamine. You have it. Use dopamine. But if you want more dopamine, you have dopamine. That means you have it. You want it because you want the dopamine. If you see it as craving brain stimulation, you can apply it to literally everything.
Listen, Morty, I hate to break it to you, but what people call love is just a chemical reaction that compels animals to breed.
Your Honor, I merely robbed the bank because I wanted more brain stimulation.
Objection!
You don't want to work on your business, you just want more brain stimulation. Dad, let's have a catch.
Watching CEO interviews.
The cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon.
Even though there have been more rat studies than episodes of One Piece, oh my god, do they love this one rat study. It's like, come on guys, there's so many different rat experiments. They taught rats how to drive cars.
Deja vu, I just been in this place before.
It's so cool. A lot of the footage comes from this very old school video. These experiments were done by James Olds and Peter Milner, and they were trying to figure out what brain stuff does. They found that rats who had their brains electrically stimulated in a particular area would keep doing a given activity, like pressing a lever until the heat death of the universe. And that's all they would do. They would keep pressing the lever over and over, forever and ever.
Gee, mate, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky.
Press the button, press the rat button, press the rat button.
So yeah, this is where all the dopamine videos get it from. That's why you get people saying things like,
we've all turned into dopamine addicted rats and we're pressing the lever again and again and again and again.
While interesting, you can't really compare direct brain stimulation to any other kind of activity, since it completely bypasses the natural reward mechanisms.
My phone is on airplane mode in a drawer in my kitchen and I don't use it. It is literally a piece of technology designed just like that rat button to hit the electrode in your brain and give you a dopamine hit. It is literally designed for that.
Cool, yeah, people be like that sometimes.
Society.
Mark Zucker, dude, ain't sticking an electrode directly into your brain. Kent describes a more recent experiment with laser rats. Not to be confused with laser cats. Using a laser, they would stimulate the amygdala and pair it with an associated stimuli, like sugar or cocaine. They didn't want the laser by itself, but whatever it was paired to, they wanted that stimuli more. They even paired the laser to an electric shock rod and found that the rat was fascinated with this rod. Sounds kinda like those other rats. Maybe they're just really motivated to press levers. I mean, direct brain stimulation is kinda like a cheat code. It becomes paradoxical in the sense that the same brain stimulation can be both motivating and rewarding at the same time. Keep in mind that these are experimental models that get animals to perform basic activities. Kelly Lambert puts it like this.
And if we want to learn about our complex emotional disorders or cognitive changes, we probably need to look at more complex research designs and look at something besides a rat and a mouse, and also look at behaviors beyond pressing a bar or turning right or left in a simple maze, because even the rat brain can do so much more.
What else can they do? What are their dreams? Okay, fine. So you can't literally get addicted to dopamine.
The naturally occurring brain chemical involved in various functions.
They didn't mean it literally. They were just being poetic. Romeo, Romeo, your love is like dopamine. When it comes to the actual amount of dopamine released from various activities, there are a little less numbers and figures and more 21 Savage.
A huge amount of dopamine.
A huge amount of dopamine.
Massive amounts of dopamine.
Unnaturally high amounts of dopamine.
How much dopamine?
A lot.
How much dopamine?
A lot.
How much dopamine?
A lot.
Seriously, how much? A lot. Can you measure dopamine levels?
It's over 9,000!
What are the ESPN dopamine power rankings? I found all these charts on the internet, and here's the thing. You can't actually measure dopamine levels. Sort of. What are we talking about here? Are we talking about overall dopamine levels? Are we talking about amount of dopamine released from activity or substance? Are we talking about both? What's your dopamine power level?
120, 140, 157. Oh shit, Charlie, 157?
Is that bad?
Yeah, it's not good.
Guys, I got 157. Wait. 157 what?
Units.
Units, dude.
Units of what?
Units of
Dopamine.
You're very, very high in
That's a lot of units.
The key point is, you need the right level of dopamine to function normally.
Hi, me again. I have a question. What is the right amount of dopamine?
There are two options, chocolate or carrots. Your brain's going to compare the chocolate to the carrot to which one's going to give you the most dopamine. And the chocolate gives you more dopamine than the carrot.
How hungry are you?
It's like...
What separates this from this? What about this from this? And this from this?
Peanuts pizza.
Oh, what about this?
I am Morpheus.
From this?
Morpheus, go get to the buffet and Morris's. Corpses, Worcester sauce.
It's still pretty vague and doesn't get quantified in any sort of meaningful way. It's like everything releases dopamine.
Even drinking water when you're thirsty does.
Everything in this world.
Everything the light touches.
The more fun or pleasurable a thing is, the more dopamine-y it is. And so you get more dopamine that way, but also you get a lot in anticipation and an unexpected reward.
But the highest dopamine release happens when you get a reward randomly.
Well, I don't know what I expected.
There aren't any concrete units of measurement saying activity X releases Y amount of dopamine under condition Z, Q, T. So you just turn into 21 Savage. I think the answer lies with Wolfram Schultz going back to the monkeys.
Go back! I want to be monkey!
He was using fast scan
voltammetry
to measure changes in the activity of dopamine neurons on a millisecond to millisecond basis, not the overall absolute amount of dopamine. You get a general idea of some of the functions of dopamine, just not how much gets released when you do whatever. It's a bit different from the other charts I found. Many of these measurements were done using microdialysis in rat experiments to measure the percentage of basal release over a longer time scale. So when it comes to dopamine levels, you'd think this would be it, but with the exception of one very special experiment, they don't get mentioned at all. So you can kind of measure dopamine levels, but because both techniques require you to stick a probe in the brain, it's kind of impractical.
in humans.
Measurements done in human people use indirect methods and are utilized in specific cases. There's a PET scan that can measure the density of dopamine transporters, but that's a very specific test to measure Parkinson's. They've also been used to measure D2 and D3 receptor availability in relation to drug use, and similar to the test before, it correlates neurotransmitter release to receptor availability. You kind of have to factor in what the baseline receptor availability would be, as they can differ from person to person, and researchers still don't know if any identified differences are preconditions or adaptations. It isn't like microdialysis or fast scan voltammetry, so kinda sorta dopamine levels. There are fMRIs which can measure brain activity in different regions, but that's more like, aha, there's blood flow and oxygen to these brain parts. It doesn't really tell you the levels or activity of any specific neurotransmitter. They kind of have their limitations. And then when you factor in all the different neurotransmitters and the way these systems interact with each other, you know.
Why do you have to go and make things so complicated?
A huge amount of dopamine. High dopamine. High, sky high. It can't be quantified in any sort of meaningful way. It ain't on the nutritional label. Once again, they were just being poetic. To be or not to be. My brain is flooded with dopamine. So with that caveat in mind, it seems like the ESPN dopamine power rankings would be methamphetamine, cocaine, LeBron James, New York Jets, which is just bizarre. They seem to lump in drugs with every other kind of activity or behavior. Like, yeah, dopamine's involved in reward-seeking behavior, but
our craving for dopamine is so intense that our brain is willing to sabotage so many different areas of our life, and we see this in the most extreme case with drug addicts who literally let their whole life fall apart for dopamine. But we're not too far away from that ourselves.
Things like porn, drugs, junk food, and binge-watching shows all produce a huge amount of dopamine.
With these super stimuli, such as pornography, but also in other super stimuli we've seen, such as cocaine use or meth use.
Cocaine and heroin release unnatural amounts of dopamine, and in today's digital society, we're flooding our brains with unnaturally high amounts of dopamine on a daily basis.
We're willing to lose trust in ourselves, to go against the word that we told ourselves, to break our own promises, just to play an hour extra of video games.
a bit different. Remember how neurons in the brain send messages and all that good stuff? Brain chemistry and whatnot? Well, drugs, Wreck-It Ralph. They are kind of the second cheat code.
Water, fire, air, and dirt.
Drugs.
How do they work?
Yup. Certain drugs function by mimicking the brain's own natural chemicals, sending abnormal messages throughout the network. It's not just dopamine that's being affected, it's many different neurotransmitters that can be affected in different ways from many different types of drugs. But since we're focusing on dopamine, let's do cocaine.
Say hello to my little friend.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Don't take cocaine.
Cocaine inhibits the reuptake of dopamine by blocking dopamine transporters. This causes increased levels of dopamine in the synapse because they can't get out. Methamphetamine can get inside the neuron, mess around a little bit, and increase the release of dopamine and norepinephrine. Norepinephrine. Like, there's a reason why drugs produce an unnaturally high amount of dopamine in the brain. This is the problem when your only metric for dopamine is not a lot or a lot. Let's take the video, The Neuroscience of NoFap. Captain Sinbad compares use of pornography to cocaine use in that they're both super stimuli that keep a lot of dopamine in that synaptic region. But the graphic he uses literally shows cocaine blocking the reuptake of dopamine. It might be different, just saying.
I actually minored in neuroscience in college.
You what?
Compared to drugs, you look at all these high dopamine behaviors, scrolling through social media, playing video games, even watching pornography, and you think,
oh, so what? It's not like it's harming me in any way. But you would be wrong.
Oh shit.
Our bodies have homeostasis. Homeostasis manifests itself through tolerance. If you drink alcohol a lot, you develop a tolerance to it.
And it's not much different with dopamine. Your body tries to maintain homeostasis, so it downregulates your dopamine receptors. Essentially, your brain gets used to having high levels of dopamine, and those levels become your new normal. Thus, you develop a dopamine tolerance.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Okay, maybe that was a bit harsh. He deleted the video. His whole channel was deleted. You don't develop a tolerance to dopamine. It doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Dopamine is a naturally occurring brain chemical involved in various functions.
If you developed a dopamine tolerance, you would die. The more you drink, the more you build up an alcohol tolerance.
1 beer, 2 beers, 3 beers, 4 beers.
And the more you do dopamine stuff, the more you get a dopamine tolerance. But alcohol tolerance is affected by your body composition, drinking on an empty stomach versus eating while you drink, how fast you drink, what you drink. Years of partying will tell you this. You wouldn't call alcohol tolerance a GABA or a glutamate tolerance. What? You don't develop tolerance to dopamine, you develop tolerance to a drug. This happens because they lose their effects over time after repeated use, so you need more of the drug. Just like you always need more funk in your life, your body tries to maintain a state of homeostasis. But also there are a variety of homeostatic mechanisms, and it's impossible to say exactly which ones contribute to something like tolerance and withdrawal. Upregulation and downregulation of receptor types would be a part of this process, but for one thing, you have to consider which receptor types and in which parts of the brain are being upregulated and downregulated, because it's very, very complicated. I recorded a bit about dopamine receptors, but I got a little bit too lost in the sauce. Basically, it's kind of hard to determine how behavioral outcomes come from dopaminergic pathways, because nobody really knows. It's hard, it's complicated. But this downregulation and these homeostatic changes are in response to drug taking. In the context of addiction, which is what the website he was referencing was referring to, because of the way drugs operate in the brain, they create long-lasting changes, such that normal functioning isn't possible without them.
This is your brain on drugs.
It's like drug addicts don't have a hard time adjusting to normal life because their dopamine tolerance is too high. Complete shot in the dark here, but it could be that the negative effects of withdrawal can become a negative reinforcer that can amplify states of stress and increase cravings, but also their dopamine systems can become sensitized.
What sensitization means once it happens is that the brain mesolimbic dopamine system is hyper responsive to the drug and to drug-related cues. If the drug is suddenly taken again, it can elicit more dopamine. The system can respond more powerfully. Sensitization can happen even in a person who's developing tolerance to the drug. They happen in sort of parallel mechanisms. But sensitization is much more long-lasting and permanent. Tolerance and withdrawal in addiction goes away more or less if one stops taking the drug for weeks or months. But sensitization doesn't go away. If anything, it strengthens.
It's not that the high dopamine levels created a dopamine tolerance, now real life doesn't match it. It's that their sensitized dopamine systems are hyperreactive to drug-related cues, and it causes cravings that can be difficult to ignore. And so drugs become the most salient thing. That's what they do.
A lot of those drugs of abuse are dopamine. So it becomes this cyclical loop where there's no other behavior that can evoke the same level of release.
Right. So I don't get why drugs are getting grouped in here. I mean, it's gotta be kind of different, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't say...
Just a disclaimer, if you're suffering from a drug addiction, then I suggest you seek professional help, as you've probably formed a physiological and psychological dependence, and I don't want you to experience any extreme withdrawal symptoms. Now, back to the detox.
When you see people smoking cigarettes and you look down on them and say, oh, that person's addicted to cigarettes. Why are they smoking cigarettes? They get a dopamine hit because their brain tells them, hey, this is the one, do this, even though it's going to give you lung cancer. Same exact thing with social media.
And that's why I lace my Xbox with nicotine. Oh, so good. You are not a mindless dopamine machine. Going from 1 to 0 to 1 to 0. Those ones and zeros are modulated by your physiological brain state. Being hungry. If you are a hungry hippo, food is the only thing that matters. Being stressed. Are you in a state of wubba lubba dub dub?
In my people's tongue, it means, I am in great pain. Please help me.
Being tired. You might not care about getting your freak on if you're running on 2 hours of sleep. There are many factors at play. Your body is a wonderland. It's got all these mechanisms in place. Hormones, neurotransmitters, the Dewey Decimal System. They keep everything in check. It's not just dopamine. Stop talking about dopamine.
This can be a huge problem because the things that don't give you as much dopamine don't interest you any longer, and it's much more difficult to motivate yourself to do them. They feel boring and less fun because they don't release as much dopamine compared to the things that do release it in high amounts. Video games make us feel good and comfortable as they release a lot of dopamine. Sadly, things like working hard or reading release it in lower amounts.
What if your business is reading the internet all day and playing video games? Fun is entirely subjective. Work isn't rewarding. It's like maybe some people find the challenge of working on their business more rewarding than playing video games. Not every person identifies as a gamer American. So you got it backwards. It's not that they're less fun because they release less dopamine. They're less fun, so they release less dopamine. Dopamine is the glue between that feel-good feeling and the rewarding stimulus. It's not the reward itself. When you do an activity and you get dopamine, the dopamine release or the dopamine activity is just there for your brain to go, this good, this important.
Remember me!
I might just say you and your brain, you, your brain, you. You're learning that a stimulus will induce a pleasing sensation, and you're learning what cues and behaviors are necessary to achieve that outcome, so that you would want to keep doing those behaviors again in the future. On the next episode of Stuff Happening, when you encounter those cues, given the appropriate brain state, it'll trigger a mesocodolimbic form of wanting via dopamine release that will activate your organism to pursue behaviors necessary for the desired outcome. Wow. Dr. Andrew Huberman describes it as...
The dopamine system is Mother Nature's hardwired ancient system in all animals, including humans, to put us on the right path.
I think he put it a little bit more succinctly than I did. It's a bit of a mind meld because all these concepts such as wanting and liking and learning are all tied into each other, and you're trying to break them apart. You're trying to understand these subconscious processes that go on which govern who you are and what you do as a person.
The inner machinations of my mind are an enigma.
Let's give another nickname to dopamine. Let's call it the molecule of addiction.
Yes, dopamine plays a role in addiction. The same neural pathways that are the foundation for all your behaviors can also be a highway to the danger zone. Your same two legs can be used to run with the dogs or to kick the dog. Please only pet the dog. It's a bit more complicated than not enough dopamine. But I gotta talk about it because they talk about it.
Nobody agrees upon the definition of addiction. I think most of us have a good sense in our mind as to what addiction, quote unquote, looks like. But nobody agrees on how to actually define that.
Well, I guess it's time for debate fight.
For the sake of argument.
Is addiction a chronic relapsing brain disease, or is it not a chronic relapsing brain disease? They both look at the research, which is like, these brains are like those brains, and those brains are different from these brains. What does it mean? Researchers are trying to discover important biomarkers and understand what's going on the neurobiological level. So when you see a lack of D2 receptor availability, and someone comes along and says, well, why don't they just make better choices? You can point to the brain and go, see that? Where's R2-D2? Because of these changes, addiction can be considered a brain disease. This is where Mark Lewis comes in from the top rope. While he doesn't dispute that there are disease-like aspects to addiction, he's got beef with the disease model because he thinks it provides an ineffective method of treatment, not just through over-medicalization, but also it might be a bit disempowering to tell people they have a chronic brain disease. Hey, you can't control your substance use because you have a lack of D2 receptor availability in some parts of your brain. Thus, you are powerless and must surrender to Jesus. Mark suggests that addiction is motivated repetition that gives rise to deep learning, as if it's a skill or a deep habit. So during the addiction process, the prefrontal cortex is less in control, there's more delayed discounting, more ego fatigue, and while yes, on a fundamental level, learning is involved with everything.
I'm learning.
Same mesolimbic systems, life is a highway, same two legs.
The man put it back, sir.
This deep learning aspect can lead to some broad interpretations.
Internet gaming causes addiction. Falling in love causes addiction. But sort of, being a sports fan, being a jihadist, being a whatever.
Like, I don't think being a sports fan is the same thing as being addicted to methamphetamine, cocaine, LeBron James. I was wrong.
Is the same thing happening in my brain if I use drugs recreationally, that those synapses shutting down, the ones that were firing being fired more often?
Say the line, Bart.
It's complicated.
Learning how to do anything will change your brain. It's what brains do. Whether it's the deep learning involved with the development of addiction or the deep learning involved with the undevelopment of addiction.
You must unlearn what you have learned.
Gray matter, white matter, Black Lives Matter, it's all good, baby. The dopamine system plays a role, but calling it the molecule of addiction is kind of silly. The neurobiology of addiction still isn't fully understood, and it involves more than just dopamine.
The stats show that about 85% of people who use drugs don't get addicted.
If the majority of people do not develop addictions, then clearly it's more complicated than high dopamine levels. So whether it's a brain disease or not, I don't know. Biological causality makes my head hurt. And besides, there's more to it than that. Addictions have their roots in a variety of interconnected factors. A person's biology, their environment, socioeconomic factors, psychosocial factors, the nature of the drug or activity, a person's thoughts, beliefs, motivations, or attitudes. Dopamine wait!
Psychologists define addiction or dependence as compulsive, excessive, and difficult to control substance use, or other initially pleasurable behavior that begins to interfere with ordinary life, work, health, or relationships. This could mean over-consuming drugs or alcohol, or compulsively gambling, eating, shopping, exercising, or having sex.
So the two key aspects are the compulsive and repeated involvement with a substance or activity, and the consequences of that, namely the substantial harm it now causes to aspects of life.
Addictions lower the baseline on our life. A heroin user doesn't need to use much heroin for the first time before their relationships and their job and their health is going to suffer. I can get addicted to water, but I have to drink a lot of water before my relationships, my health, and my profession starts to suffer. I could do it, but they are far and away different molecules in terms of how they're impacting the nervous system.
Unlike drugs, which have a direct physiological impact on the brain and central nervous system that can cause long-term health problems and possibly kill you if used excessively, an excessive behavior by itself doesn't mean that the person is addicted to it, nor is it a problematic behavior.
What's the difference between a healthy excessive enthusiasm and an addiction? And for me, it's very simple. Healthy excessive enthusiasms add to life and addictions take away from it.
Mark Griffiths. This guy, he does a lot of research in the area of behavioral addictions, and he has his own set of criteria that he uses to evaluate them.
You have to endorse all 6 to actually be classed as a genuine addict, by my conceptualization. So if you only fulfill 5 of those, by my reckoning is that you're not addicted to that activity unless you can demonstrate all 6. Obviously, whether it's gaming, whether it's gambling, whether it's sex, whether it's work, okay, what we're talking about is a behavior that is on a continuum from absolutely no problems at all through to quite pathological behavior at the other end.
You can have some of these symptoms, but that alone doesn't tell you much unless you can contextualize it. It's not like there's a simple addiction test you can take that can tell.
This is an addiction test. If you say yes to 3 or more of these questions, then you have an addiction, at least according to the American Psychiatric Association.
A diagnosis in the DSM-5 can range in severity from mild to moderate to severe. It requires that an individual have significant impairment or distress from their pattern of drug use. You are evaluated by a medical professional, and for a diagnosis of addiction, you would need to meet 6 or more of the criteria. Different disorders have different criteria because different addictions are different. The DSM-5 isn't perfect, but I don't understand why you're appealing to a diagnostic manual that doesn't even recognize what you're describing as an addiction as an addiction. Hashtag dopamine detox content typically focuses on non-drug related activities, ignoring a multitude of factors that can contribute to problematic behavior in favor of a more dopamine-centric approach, which might not get to the root of the issue.
Whenever you feel stressed, anxiety, overwhelmed, depressed, whatever it is, you most often go to what will make you feel good, what will change your state. Eating dessert, video game, the YouTube, and just scroll through my social media. You're trying to cover up boredom, that anxiety, the stress. When you do try to remove those things, eating video game, eating the YouTube, scroll through my social media, eating my social media, now all these emotions show up, boredom, that anxiety, the stress. You've been masking that you now have to address and you have to learn how to overcome. And that's a scary thing for a lot of people. So, this is what dopamine does.
So everything gets tied together under this umbrella of dopamine or dopamine addiction. And they don't tell you exactly what they mean by that. They're just like, hey, all these things are kind of addictive because of the dopamine. Can you relate to that? So everybody watching does their own cost-benefit analysis and interprets addiction based on their own personal set of values. Now, I'm not saying that these addictions don't exist, nor am I saying this, nor am I trying to diminish anybody's personal experiences. Addiction is a complicated and nuanced topic, and I don't think my video where I use Goku to describe how dopamine works can do it any sort of justice. We all have different ways of conceptualizing ourselves, and for some people, viewing their problem as an addiction can be helpful or accurate for their given situation. But I can't help but think about what Mark Lewis said about belief in the disease model being disempowering for addicts. In a similar vein, you might be over-pathologizing a bad habit and adding in a whole extra layer of stress thinking that you have to fight an addiction. You can feel an overwhelming sense of dread and futility at your inability to change, thinking that you are powerless to escape from this never-ending cycle of relapsing to your addiction. When the reality is, any sort of behavioral change is challenging in general. A habit you do may not even bother you, but then you hear all about dopamine and brain changes and neurochemistry and how doing all these activities makes you a mindless NPC cog in the machine. Oh no, my dopamine levels. That's why I have no motivation to watch CEO interviews.
Watching CEO interviews.
Is a dopamine detox really an appropriate solution, given that you're encompassing a bunch of different behaviors with a broad spectrum of severity? That's why dopamine detox can be whatever you want it to be, baby. Dopamine detox was inside of you all along. What are we detoxing from? Bring, who's that? It's a free course on the Dopamine Detox. What's this guy's deal?
The concept of time has always fascinated me. I'm the founder of time theory. The time you have on this planet is finite. So many of us spend so much time on our phone, spending more time in video games. Obviously, porn takes up a certain period of time. You really are in charge of your time. So when it comes to improving your time, you've got so much spare time. Your time must be spent, and you want to better use every single second of your time, using your time wisely, using your time wisely, using your time wisely. Because when you increase the demand of your time, you're freeing up that time to do something else. This is going to increase the value of your time, decreasing the amount of time, spending all of this time just like everybody else's time. Where you have all of this spare time, you just stop wasting time. So much time. We're time theorists. I'm the founder of time theory because time is everything. Because time is time. That way I'm able to time theory. Time is limited. Time. We're time theorists. Time. So much time becoming a time theorist. I'm the founder of time theory. When it comes to using your time, figure out how to use your time.
This is professional personal development. Do you really know the value of time? Morris Day and the Time Boy, Andrew Kirby. His self-development business teaches self-development so that he can self-develop his business to teach more self-development.
Timetheory.com, it's a fascinating concept.
Not hating. Man's gotta eat. I do get super sketchy vibes from his website, and procrastination forever without willpower, motivation, or discipline. What am I using? Time powers?
Dormammu, I've come to bargain.
Under program reviews, Mr. Beast logo is there. You can't click it. It doesn't link to anything. It's part of the background. I don't know what it means. The written reviews are like, Andrew makes good stuff. Cool. But hey, feel free to spend your money however you want. His whole kind of general philosophy is that you learn the value of time so that you can manage your time better and become a time lord, I guess.
This channel, we're time theorists.
So Doctor Who's Mental Momentum series is pretty in-depth as far as dopamine detox content goes. If you take the time to go through it, there's actually some good advice with a dash of,
Are you sure about that?
though an hour of it is just him sitting on his ass. It's supposed to teach you how to stop consuming personal development content, which, quick tip, if you can predict what they're going to say based on the title and description, or if you're watching the video and think, hey, I've heard this before, it's probably a sign you should stop consuming personal development content, and instead, I don't know, you can use them to play drinking games, I guess. Oh my god, you said dopamine, take a shot.
And if you've enjoyed this video, I also think you're going to enjoy this video that's on the screen right now. So go ahead and click it, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
I thought the aim of the course was to stop people from consuming more personal development content. I'm not trying to pick on Andrew or rip him apart point by point. It's just a convenient framing device. You can check out his content.
I'm the founder of Time Theory.
So a dopamine detox can involve all these activities with different levels of difficulty, from baby mode to Sekiro. It's supposed to cater to what's most appropriate for you, but these main ones seem to be the key areas. Let's spin the wheel of destiny to find out where we go. Let's try again. One more time. Wow, look where it landed. Social media. Why is it bad?
About now, you still wired in?
You can compare yourself to the unrealistic presentation of people supposedly living their best lives. Not only your friend group, but also celebrities, billionaires, Obama. You can also measure yourself in terms of engagement, likes, comments, upvotes, hearts, retweets, friend requests, subscribers, followers, Patreoners, merch sales. Not only that, but the websites are designed to keep you there forever. Recommendations in the sidebar. Algorithms cater to your personality. Timelines and infinite scrolling. It starts with you checking a Facebook post, but without even noticing, you've been sucked up into a distraction vortex. And oh, the places you'll go.
Stay with me.
You darn kids always spending time on your phones. I mean, it's understandable, right? If all your friends and peers are using these social media apps to communicate and interact with each other, sharing all the dank memes, Of course they're going to spend a lot of time on them. I agree that there are negative aspects to social media. As if being a teenager, a young adult, or a person in general wasn't difficult enough, there can be this pressure to always be on or in the know, constantly comparing yourself to an inaccurate version of reality. Most people aren't sharing the mundane day-to-day aspects of their lives. And even when they do share things, it's like, here's my baby, here's my dog. We are friends and we are having a good time being friends. Ha ha ha, we are friends. I'd like to think that we're not as ignorant about this degree of artificiality, as well as some of the drawbacks to social media. I just believe that these issues exist as part of a larger societal context, and that we need to keep things in perspective.
Literally, social media has removed the friction, removed the barriers to entry for bullying someone. We have never experienced hate on that kind of a level ever before on the planet, ever.
Bruh. But yeah, with this added spotlight on some of the negative aspects of social media, one can begin to deduce with their logical brain that, oh, that's fake. Oh, I can't compare to that. Oh, I can't compare to that situation.
Oh, I know that, so it's not going to affect me. But this isn't true. Our brain is emotional, not logical. And regardless of whether you know the truth, if you input that data into your mind, your brain is still going to compare your situation to their situation. It's simply how our brain works, and knowing it logically doesn't change anything.
Yeah, well, emotionally, if you didn't care, these things wouldn't bother you. It's like if all your friends are getting married and they're having babies, and you're looking at all these baby pictures, but you don't want a baby. So it doesn't matter how many baby pictures you look at, because you don't want a baby. I remember years ago, I would look on social media and see pictures of people in relationships, and I get a little bit jealous, thinking, hey, that's what I wanted, that's what's missing from my life. But with time and experience, I got more emotionally chill about it. I'm just cool being myself. Yeah. You can compare yourself to everyone on the planet, but why? Why are you doing that? Why do you care? And sort of begin to understand why you think the way you think, or why you do the way you do. There's a difference in mindset between, oh, they have a dog, I wish I had a dog, oh, I suck without a dog, and I wish I had a dog, but I'm happy for them, and I'm happy just the way I am. It kind of comes down to having some self-esteem and understanding your values. Nobody's perfect. Don't beat yourself up. Be kind to yourself. I love you.
You're beautiful.
You're beautiful.
This last little part has been a little less data-driven and a bit more anecdotal. That's one of the problems I came across researching this area. Andrew points it out as well.
Just because there's an increase in the usage of social media and there's an increase in depression doesn't mean that the increase in social media usage resulted in that increase in depression.
Correlation doesn't equal causation. There can be many variables. I can think of a few things that might correlate: your cost of living, job security, access to affordable healthcare, work environment in general, student debt, financial debt, lack of meaningful connections, lack of community, the goddamn state of the world.
I think addiction to screen time is as dangerous as a pandemic.
Too real.
Yes, it's just as dangerous as the deadly pandemic that's affecting all of our lives. Bruh. As for the social media platforms themselves, yes, they're designed to be easy to use and to keep you engaged with them as long as possible, to sometimes show you ads. As it turns out, giant corporations incentivized by a profit-motivated system may not always have your best interests at heart. But not everything is this malicious conspiracy theory where tech CEOs are trying to manipulate your brains or whatever.
Why do you think that Facebook has a like button? Why do you think that notifications are red? Why do you think that video games have a rank system? Why do you think that smartphone manufacturers have put such an emphasis and spent so much money and so much time on making something that's small enough to put into your pocket?
Hello? I don't know. Sometimes they just design a thing to be useful. No. We must increase the dopamine units. Like, most people have adapted to this technology as part of their lives. It can get distracting. A lot of these instant gratification activities are easy to start and to do, and not so easy to stop. There's no gorilla that bursts into your room telling you to get off Facebook. Reddit and YouTube are my jam. And maybe I'm just weird, but the endless novelty loses its novelty after a while. I can only go through so much content before I'm like, there's too much content. shut up content. It kind of goes back to the not caring aspect I was talking about earlier. Caring about other things more than social media, having more important things to do. It makes the instant gratification less gratifying. And as an added bonus, it creates a gorilla in your brain who can recognize when it's time to stop. If you are concerned with the amount of time you spend on social media, there are tools and strategies you can use. There are like a bajillion videos and articles on how to control your social media use. Pick something and see what works for you. Engage the call to action. If worst comes to worst, you can just banish them to the shadow realm. Of course, it isn't all negative. Andrew does acknowledge a few positives of social media, like learning from YouTube and being able to connect with people. But I just want to add that social media is a lot of fun. You get to share memes. Here is a meme. Thank you for the meme. In these online spaces, you can find people who share in your wholesome interests. There are some genuinely insightful and hilarious posters who know how to post. You know who you are. Now, I cannot get into every aspect of every social media platform, but the gist of what I'm trying to say is, social media is silly. Don't let it define your self-worth. Social media, my final score, 8 out of 10.
Transition.
Video games. Why are they bad?
I love the Power Glove. It's so bad.
I'm not saying all video games are bad.
Okay. In this section, Andrew uses Call of Duty Warzone as an example of a masterpiece. You see, in Call of Duty Warzone, you get experience points and you get ranked, and you don't know how much XP you're gonna get or when you're gonna rank up. So you keep playing the game, doing all the objectives, getting all the XP so you can get better guns and better outfits, I guess. But didn't you know? All the progress you make in video games is real fake news because you don't actually get anywhere in real life.
It's just an illusion.
See, video games give you a clear sense of purpose and fulfill various emotional needs. Oftentimes you're with the team and you're with your bros and you're all broing it up in the bro zone. Call of Duty, modern bro zone, Warzone, bro zone. But gaming's original sin is that it wastes a lot of time you can spend doing other things.
Business.
So you have to compute the inputs of gaming to the outputs of gaming. And if you get the wrong score, go straight to time jail. Andrew admits that he's making a lot of generalizations here. Don't we all? But I feel the need to make the distinction between shitty modern day business practices and just regular ass game design. Jim Sterling did an excellent video on this, by the way. You should check it out. With a lot of modern day gaming, the two have seemingly been together, and I think you gotta keep them separated. Certain games have the capacity to be quote-unquote more addictive than other types of games. The social element is a large factor, but I'm talking strictly game design. It's mainly the games that go on literally forever and then compel you to play them literally forever.
How do I turn you off?
Fort game, league game, pub game.
Wow.
These games are different, but they seem to share in the aspect of never-ending growth and reinforcement. Either in the game itself, where you go on long, time-consuming adventure quests, exploring a vast virtual world where you get achievements and you get experience points and you can keep unlocking items. Gotta catch all the items. This gives you multiple ways to build your character, or to dig your Minecraft hole, and you just keep doing that. Or the never-ending growth aspect manifests itself through skill improvement. You get better at the game and you get a higher ranking, and you keep wanting to go higher and higher, because having your ranking all the way up and seeing your skills improve gives you a huge sense of achievement. Gamers sure do love a challenge.
Oh no, I'm done. I'm not playing this game anymore. This is the dumbest fucking game on the planet.
These game design elements aren't bad. It just depends how they exist within the context of the game. I'll get to my gamer perspective in just a bit, but first I want to touch on the brain science. In the previous section on social media, I did not broach the topic of internet addiction because it's not so much that the person is on the internet, but what the person is doing on the internet that matters. But a lot of papers took a broad view of internet use, and internet gaming was lumped in there as well. I came across the same recurring limitations: small sample sizes, not accounting for comorbidities, causation. But I digress. There have been studies showing the beneficial effects of video games in the brain, particularly in the networks that control attention. And as for the negative effects, well, these studies typically focus on people who are addicted, who have severe impairment because of their condition. They don't do studies on people who have like kind of sort of maybe problems, but not really, but I don't really know, whatever. They don't do studies on whatever brains. The only reason I was looking at all these brain studies is because all these dopamine detox videos were talking about dopamine. And the more I looked into it, the more I encountered a lot of, are these neurobiological anomalies the cause of or the consequence of the behavior? We don't know exactly. We need to do more research. We always have to do more research. It isn't much clearer when it comes to dopamine. There's a 1998 study that gets cited a lot, but they were measuring the binding potential of raclopride and then reverse jujitsuing the numbers with dopamine levels found in primates just to get an estimate. They also had a monetary incentive to complete the game. Getting paid to play video games. What a novel concept.
I'm losing my mind!
I couldn't find a clear answer, but it seems that dopamine levels, dopamine release, dopamine, it seems to fall within a normal range. So eventually I became the anti-zombie. I got so sick of brains. When it came to video gaming, I was mainly interested in the difference between professional gamers and those with gaming disorder. Here you have two groups of people who play a lot of video games, but one group of people gets really good at pushing buttons and the other group ruins their lives. But first, an important PSA. Although somewhat controversial, internet gaming disorder has been recognized by the WHO.
Attention, all gamers.
This is not an attack on your way of life. It is merely the acknowledgement that based on a strict set of clinical criteria, a small minority of gamers will develop a pathological behavior that requires empathy and treatment. Jim Sterling did an excellent video on this, by the way. You should check it out. This concludes the PSA. So the one kind of not-brain study comparing professional gamers to those with gaming disorder found that the professional gamers had a well-controlled support system. They had a regular schedule composed of many activities, and they had a supervisor helping them along the way. This seems like a big, well, duh. You know, I found a website for parents concerned that their kids might have a Fortnite addiction, and the recommendations it makes are just like good parenting. This is where my gamer perspective comes in. Growing up, played the computer games, played the video games, played all the games. In the old house, we had this big open room where all the computers were located. So me and my siblings, we could all get together and play games and watch each other play games. It was a very fun time. And we could play those games so long as we did well in school and behaved. Because if we didn't behave, we get computer bans, TV bans, video game bans. You just get banned. And when you're a kid, that sucks. But I also had a bunch of other hobbies like playing sports, even though I wasn't that good at sports. I remember in high school, I was playing intramural hockey and I was a goalie, and I had a heated gamer moment where I got mad at a kid, so I hit him in the leg with a plastic stick. I got suspended from school and I had to write an essay about it. Due to my violent outbursts and a string of bad grades in chemistry class, I had to wait weeks before getting Halo 2, the biggest and most hyped video game event of the year, because my parents wouldn't let me. That's right, I was banned from getting Halo 2 because I hit a guy in the leg with a stick. So with video games, I think it depends on what kinds of games you play, who you play them with, and why. To be charitable to Andrew, I think in this video he's referring to people who might play video games a lot and not much else, even if the behavior isn't pathological. Andrew does bring up his own experiences, which I can't speak to one way or the other, though he does bring up the WHO, but just says this.
If anything takes up that much time of our life, I'm the founder of time theory, and if something's taking up that much of our time, we've got to at least look into it.
It's not just about time, god damn it.
People are wearing diapers so that they don't have to leave the game, so that they can play it longer.
Just because you've got more XP in a game, that doesn't mean you're actually improving yourself. What utility does that have in the real day-to-day life? How can you benefit yourself? How can you benefit humanity with that improvement? You simply can't.
Like, maybe playing the game relieves some stress. It makes you feel good about yourself, so you have a more sunny disposition to those around you. Maybe playing the game lets you share experiences with other people. You get to be part of a larger community and build long-lasting friendships around a shared interest. People have actually gotten married and have made little baby gamers by meeting through some of these games. The benefits can be a bit broader than just gaining XP on a character. People have gained self-esteem and positivity through gaming. If that doesn't benefit humanity, what? Just remember, inputs and outputs. It can be applied to anything. Playing a musical instrument, gardening, fixing a hole where the rain gets in.
Humans have a tendency to compete. Survival of the fittest. Us as a tribe.
Something, evolutionary psychology. At least Andrew's being reasonable and providing a framework. It's not like he's saying playing video games is single-handedly the most damaging thing you can do.
There is single-handedly no hobby or side thing you can do that will probably be more damaging to you being successful than playing video games.
Not even a little itty bitty video game?
No, that's not how it works. You can't play them at all because of how it affects your brain.
Aww.
The cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon.
You know that when you put the controller down, you're still thinking about it for about 2 to 3 hours, thinking about, how can I get that next epic item? Thinking about how to win at Super Smash Bros. How to train your Pokemon to the highest level. I even have custom modded controllers. Now I can explain all the science behind it, but I will sound like an idiot. So that's why you can't play video games. It hijacks your subconscious.
It hijacks your brain. Something dopamine, which is true. Think about it. Have you ever gone to bed and the video game soundtrack is still playing in your head?
Do the Mario! Swing your arms from side to side. Come on, it's time to go. Do the Mario!
I remember when I beat Breath of the Wild, I was riding around in the motorcycle at the end after, I don't know, like 150 hours, 200 hours invested. And I'm like, this is it. And then I turned off my Switch and had nothing to show for it.
I just spent hours of my life doing a thing I enjoyed. What? The only thing you get out of it is the experience itself. You can't overlook the artistic merits of video games. Look at this, it's beautiful. People need art as an outlet sometimes. Doing and experiencing different things can expand your mind creatively, or it can take your mind off things and give you a break. Breath of the Wild is its own self-contained, finite story. You could play it for 200 hours if you're a completionist, but you don't have to. Maybe being a super competitive business boy makes you super boy business competitive about everything. So if you want to be Elon Musk, don't you want to be Elon Musk? You can't play the video game.
What? Nothing for you.
Binge drinking probably has less of an impact than playing video games, to an extent.
What? Again, it depends on what you play, who you play it with, and why. One last thing. Andrew mentions how he was kind of deluding himself into thinking he was becoming a professional video game player, but I got news for you. In today's world, you can make a living off of playing video games, and you don't even have to be good at them. You just have to be entertaining and provide people with high quality content.
I'm magic too. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at this. I'm magic too. Fuck.
It's that easy. If you build a large enough following, you too can become a successful streamer of the online video games. Anyway, video games, my final score, 9 out of 10.
Transition.
So you got a hot date tonight. You go pick him up, you go meet him. You're looking great, they're looking great, everybody's looking great. It's pop quiz time. The first thing you say to them is A, oh hey, you look nice. Or B,
do you watch porn? Do you masturbate?
What?
Let me tell you something. Bustin' makes me feel good.
Pornography and masturbation. Why is it bad? The first thing you say to them, the real answer is C. You can say whatever you want. It's a date. In this section, I will be touching on the no-touching movement known as NoFap. If you don't know what NoFap is, God bless your heart. First, I got 3 disclaimers. Number 1, I am a cisgendered heterosexual man, and my perspective is limited as such. I try to keep things gender neutral because that's just how I roll, but you know. Number 2, I'm gonna try and keep it as PG as possible, which may be difficult given the subject matter. While you can probably glean some of my attitudes around sex and sexuality, I'm putting a lid on my own sexual business, because I don't know who's gonna be watching. And finally, I'm not trying to knock people trying to better themselves. If this helps you become the best version of yourself, cool. Rocket speed to you. Rocket ship it, go baby, go. All the way up. So NoFap is a movement / ideology / way of life / discipline / support group / internet cult that centers around some combination of not watching pornography, not masturbating, and not orgasming, with a key focus on pornography and some of the damaging effects it may have. Where do I even begin? It is a super normal stimuli that is more readily available and more novel than primitive sex. It molds your sexual tastes. It can give you a warped view on sexuality. You escalate to more extreme and shocking content. It can waste a lot of time.
So much time.
Less sexual satisfaction. It ruins your relationships. But wait, there's more. Changes in libido. Changes in arousal. Changes in sexual desire. Erectile dysfunction. All this stuff. It changes your brain. It ruins your life. Dopamine. Mr. Andrew Kirby covers a few of those, although when it comes to masturbation, he ends up taking a more reasonable approach, preaching moderation and getting to the root of your issues, which I can agree with. If viewed as a tool for self-improvement, fine. If you feel as though those behaviors having a negative impact on your life, your feelings are valid, you can do what you want, I don't have a problem with that. It's mainly the stuff like this that I take an issue with.
Every new video, every new clip you watch is like taking another little bump of cocaine. Another little bump of cocaine.
Coincidentally, this is the area with the most pseudoscience. When it comes to sex and the society, there is a large religious elephant in the room that comes with a lot of historical baggage, and I don't have the wherewithal to tackle this issue along those lines. Instead, my own kind of take is that we're really weird about sex. Dudes especially, we tie up all this sex stuff with our conception of masculinity, and when you consider how weird we get when it comes to the topic of our wieners, this perfectly explains the existence of NoFap. So sex can be a bit of silly adult fun, then again, it can mean whatever you want it to mean. That's the beauty of human sexuality. In a similar vein, pornography is kind of silly too. It's both mainstream and taboo in the sense that it seems like everybody watches it, but not mainstream enough where you have commentary channels discussing the Brazzers extended universe.
Holy shit!
With a lot of the highly produced stuff, it can be laughable at how unlike real sex it is. It's like you're watching professional stunt performers at Cirque du Soleil, but you know, some people like that. Different strokes for different folks. Ha! As long as it's ethically produced between consenting adults, I don't see the issue with it.
Wrong, sir. Wrong!
Where you see, there's a man from Oregon named Gary Wilson who gave a TEDx talk many years ago discussing the great porn experiment. Although he claims to be an agnostic atheist, he is most certainly a true believer when it comes to the topic of porn addiction. His MO is to gish gallop every single porn-related study in the history of the universe and to pimp out his website, yourbrainonporn.com. The website is presented as objective and science-based, yet it is littered with sensationalism and emotionally loaded language. There's an entire section dedicated to his ongoing holy war with researcher Nicole Prouse. Regardless of what she's done, this level of obsession is just wow. You can get lost in a sea of endless links, paragraphs, articles, anecdotes. I experienced more brain fog going through yourbrainonporn.com than I ever had browsing pornporn.com. The purpose of this website is clearly as an artistic piece, meant to emulate the experience of online internet pornography. It is, quite literally, yourbrainonporn.com. Gary Berry has the science on his side, except when he doesn't, in which case it's biased and wrong.
Science is a liar sometimes.
Oh boy.
And this is what's so upsetting to me, is this has just grown in the meme, accepted in the peer-reviewed research, without any critical analysis, peer-reviewed research. And that's how a lot of things become real, because they've been validated by science. Don't get me started on that.
Am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
And no need to read, but the truth is there are 6 studies that show desensitization in porn users.
Oh, but I did read them.
That's right, I care now. You made me care more.
So desensitization is one of these 4 major brain changes in addiction, or as he puts it,
your brain lowers the pleasure thermostat.
And you develop tolerance and escalate to like
girls with goats or bestiality or into some really strange stuff.
Pizza time.
Alright, let's look at the studies. Turns out that there's in this study, they were testing attentional bias to sex-related words. They were pretty vague about what they meant by a sexually active individual, and they were discussing sexual compulsivity in general. Like at the end, they were theorizing about a developing arousal template, and the more compulsive, sexually active participants becoming numb to the normalized sex-related words. Technically, it's habituation to sexual stimuli, except those sexual stimuli are words like this, and being habituated to those words may not mean that one is habituated to the visual stimuli associated with them. They're trying to extrapolate a lot from a little, and it needs more research. In this study, they were looking at individuals with a tendency towards cybersex addiction and how they perform in a multitasking situation. They had a quote, less balanced performance. The authors theorize about approach and avoidance motivation with regards to pornographic material. There's no discussion of habituation, no indication of habituation, so I guess it needs more research. In this study, they were using fMRIs to study the brains of those with problematic hypersexual behavior. I don't know why this is on a list for habituation, since it shows that the PHB group had more brain activation in response to sexual stimuli. And yes, while the PHB group were masturbating more and looking at more pornography than the control group, they were also having a lot more sex with a lot more people. The term porn user is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. In this study by you-know-who, they were testing sexual cue reactivity in hypersexual people who reported problems in regulating their use of visual sexual stimuli. And they found a small difference in brain reactivity to sexual stimuli as opposed to a larger one. The authors offer habituation as one explanation for these results, since they would expect enhancement of the LPP2 cues in those with higher sexual desire, and they go, aha, see, it's not addiction. But then Gary goes, aha, see, the porn did a habituation, which is part of addiction. So you can literally just interpret the data however you want. It's almost as if MRIs and brain scans have their own limitations, and there's only so much information you can gain from them. Kind of like how all these studies have limitations, and you should be cautious in jumping to conclusions. In this study, they were looking at the association between pornography consumption and gray matter volume in the brain. They did find a correlation between less gray matter volume and more porno hours, but remember,
just because there's an increase in the usage of porn and there's an increase in reduced gray matter, doesn't mean that the increase in porn resulted in that increase in reduced gray matter.
Thanks, Andrew. A positive correlation was observed between porno hours, alcohol use, and depression. So when it comes to habituation, there's this slide, which isn't actually a quote from the study. The closest thing I found was this paragraph here, but oh boy, was I surprised when I looked up the source.
Yes, I have viewed pornography.
Because it is everywhere.
Well, I guess that explains the habituation. It doesn't seem to be that objective. Maybe it's just me. This wasn't the first time I looked up a source and encountered Jesus. When Captain Sinbad's talking about the brains, he flashes this graphic on the screen, and I wanted to figure out what the mashed potatoes were all about, and oh my lord.
Like I had a rope around my leg, they have a noose around their soul. And the harder they pull against it, the worse it gets. That's why trying harder doesn't work. You have to know your enemy if you're going to win. It's not just going to go away. Just the power of sexual bondage. It promises you everything, gives you absolutely nothing. It feels as if there's no hope, you're never getting out of this. But the shed blood of Jesus Christ guarantees there's a way out.
Defending your soul against pornography is just like fighting in the American war. Which war? I don't know. Lastly, there's this study, which is closely linked to this other study, in that they share the same researchers examining the same individuals with compulsive sexual behavior. And yeah, they had a greater choice preference for novel sexual images, cues conditioned to those sexual images, and habituation of the deck to repeated sexual imagery. They give their reasoning as to why this may be consistent with an habituation effect, but in the end, they point out that future studies without these limitations might yield different results. So they need to do more more research. In this context, they're referring to the Q conditioning aspect of the research, but I don't think it detracts from my overall theme. There are limitations, slow your roll. Dr. Valerie Voon echoed this sentiment.
This is easily one of the first studies of its kind, but what I would emphasize is that a lot more work needs to be done.
Despite her caution, the interviewee's takeaway was
this research seems to show that porn can be addictive. If that's the case, and we allow our children free access to online porn, that's like leaving heroin lying around the house.
What? The researchers say that their findings may only apply to those with CSB and may not be relevant to the wider population. If you are a concerned parent, consider parental controls, good sexual education.
Here's the penis.
And only give your kids this kind of heroin. This isn't me trying to make an epic point-by-point debunk video. I refuse to stoop to the level of CinemaSins. When it came to the science of NoFap, this website popped up a lot. But I began to notice a pattern where they take any kind of research that supports their claims and just shove it in your face, oftentimes misrepresenting what the studies say or omitting certain details. Just the crème de la crème, perfect example. Et les deux articles avalués par le père de Gary Wilson. The first paper had to issue a correction disclosing Gary Wilson's conflict of interest, namely that he holds an honorary position at the Reward Foundation, their Ard Foundation, a Scottish charity that focuses on internet pornography. Het Pornobrien. The second paper was published in the prestigious journal, the Addicta? It's Turkish. He pimps out his website again, but also references the first paper in this small paragraph.
2 of the 3 men healed their sexual dysfunctions by eliminating porn use. The third man was unable to abstain from pornography use.
That can't be it. Where's the rest of it?
I'll tell you, Zuko. The first guy was masturbating 1 or more times per day using both internet pornography and a fake vagina. His relationship improved when he cut down on internet porn, but also he stopped using the toy. The second man was looking at more hardcore internet pornography, but also had increased his masturbation frequency. The doctor told him, like, hey, don't jack off so much, but he just couldn't do it. The third man had a psychiatric history. He was taking antidepressant medication, and he was drinking alcohol while on said medication, even though you probably shouldn't do that. He was spending over 5 hours a day looking at online pornography for about 6 months. He stopped looking at porn cold turkey, and voila. Yeah, so there are a lot of variables, and I don't think the short paragraph quite captures the nuance.
And this is what's so upsetting to me, is this has just grown in the mean, accepted in the peer-reviewed research, without any critical analysis.
Compulsive sexual behavior has been recognized by the ICD-11 in their categories on impulse control disorders. The clinical criteria excludes distress related to moral judgments about the behavior, so this would be a lot of people. This would include compulsive behavior related to pornography, but an internet pornography disorder has not been classified as its own thing. I understand why scientists and medical professionals are being careful. There are still gaps in the knowledge base, all the limitations I mentioned before, but also these studies use different criteria and different measurements. Not to mention there's a painful legacy when it comes to pathologizing sexuality. So I think these diagnostic guidelines are reasonable. They just need to study it more, because human sexual behavior, it's complicated. Now, I'm not saying that pornography addiction isn't real.
What is real? How do you define real?
Or that it will never be recognized as its own individual disorder. People are deserving of empathy and treatment no matter what ails them. It's just a matter of understanding the nature of the problem so that they can get the right kinds of treatment. Maybe it's semantics, maybe addiction is very Avril Lavigne, but those who have been screaming about pornography addiction have been doing so for years. Regardless of what the evidence says, the vibe I get is that they want scientific validation to justify their pre-held beliefs. And if you are with them, then obviously you're in the pocket of big porno. Can't wait to get that big porno money. A lot of it is oddly familiar to the section on pseudoscience, so rather than seeing them like objective truth seekers, I see them more like ideological crusaders. Basically, if somebody says that you can manually control your dopamine levels, probably full of shit. Where are they even getting this idea from? Calvin Coolidge? It's the same study? Another rat study? So I had to look up how rats have sex. Let's set the scene. The male rat is just chilling by himself. Female rat number 1 is presented behind a screen door, and he goes, wow. The screen door is removed and c'est l'amour. The male rat will spend most of his time and effort pursuing her to copulate. This involves mounting, intromission, and ejaculation. After ejaculation, he'll take a breather, groom himself, and then get right back to it. It takes about 7 to 8 ejaculations before the male rat's like, yeah, I'm good, and reaches sexual satiety. He gets to chill for a while before the first female is reintroduced. Some rats do renew their copulation with female rat number 1, but others do not. In this case, a novel female rat is introduced. Even though the male rat's pretty spent, he still goes, ah yeah, and copulates. This is what's known as the Coolidge effect.
The reinitiation of sexual behavior in a sexually satiated animal in response to a novel receptive mate.
According to some, the Coolidge effect is where the pornography gets its power. The novelty just keeps your dopamine levels through the roof.
Novelty is stimulating.
This same effect is 100% present in humans. This means while watching pornography, you can consistently keep your dopamine levels high by watching different videos. Every new video, every new clip you watch is like taking another little bump of cocaine.
Merely having sexual novelty isn't the Coolidge effect. This is the Coolidge effect.
The reinitiation of sexual behavior in a sexually satiated animal in response to a novel receptive mate.
Limbic systems be damned, but I don't think that browsing pornography is the same thing as a rat having sex. When a rat is engaged in sexual behavior, he's chasing her around, mounting her. You're not quite doing the same thing with every different video or picture you come across. If you are, god damn.
But the dopamine levels are going through the roof.
The concentration of dopamine efflux is high, but only peaks during the first bout of copulation and then gradually tapers off over the course of sexual behavior.
However, when a new female mouse was introduced, his dopamine levels would spike all the way back up and he'd be able to go at it again.
Except they didn't spike all the way back up. They had a brief fling, but the male rat was waving the white flag at this point. Novelty is stimulating, but not to infinity.
We need rest. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is spongy and bruised.
It time, snoo. Can't we just cuddle? No!
There was very little information about the Coolidge effect being tested in humans. One of the top links was to the Reward Foundation, which led to this website, which led to this subreddit, where they're avoiding having orgasms to keep their dopamine levels in balance so that they won't have an urge to look for new partners or find flaws in their current one.
But also the same can be found in humans. They were measuring the penis circumference of men when they were watching porn, and they would show the porn on repeat again and again and again, the same movie, and eventually their penis circumference decreased. But then when a new porn movie was put on, the penis circumference enlarged.
This comes from a 2000 study, which is behind a paywall. They were measuring eye blink startle to examine emotional processing of sexual stimulation. There was habituation, but also dishabituation when the stimuli was reintroduced. Here's my very non-scientific explanation. If you had to watch the opening crawl to The Empire Strikes Back on repeat over and over and over again, you probably get used to it, if not bored of it. Even if it's your favorite movie and you love the Star Wars. After the 20th time, you will curse the name John Williams and hate yourself for it. And I think it's like that with watching the naughty movies. I'd imagine that just sitting there watching the same porno movie over and over again would get kind of boring after a while, especially if you're limited in the way you can engage with the material. And its focus on the second dimension is very one-dimensional. Sexual attraction goes beyond mere visual sexual stimuli. Like I said, it's different strokes for different folks. Some people like chocolate, some people like vanilla, some people like both, some people like neither. One person's reaction to chocolate may be like another person's reaction to vanilla. When it comes to matters of personal taste, what can a brain scan tell you about that? But your limbic system and your dopamine, it can't tell the difference. I can. It's different. It looks different, it feels different, it smells different, it's different. Sure, with the visual sexual stimuli, you get plenty of novelty, but it's very static and fixed. When you're with an actual person, the novelty is the person. When you're flying solo, you know what you like, you're in a familiar space, you probably still have some of your clothes on.
I am completely undressed.
You are the master of your domain. When you have a partner in crime, you aren't fully in control. You have to communicate with them. You aren't just sitting on your ass, poking the nipple, doesn't close the browser tabs. This is usually where the ed talk comes in.
Erectile dysfunction.
When I'm by myself, I have happy pee-pee. But when I'm with a partner, I get sad pee-pee.
Clearly, pornography is to blame.
I think it depends on your level of sexual experience and what you bring to the table, so to speak. Gamer analogy. If you've only done the solo campaign, it might take a while for you to get the hang of online multiplayer. Even if you have some experience at the game and have worked well with other teammates before, building chemistry with a new teammate might take some time. You could have a few bad matches in a row and start to get in your head about it, and this could be affecting how you play the game. So you should talk to your squad about it, and if they're cool, they'll be like, ah, no biggie, and they will try to get you out of your slump. When you're going at Han Solo, are you ever just butt naked? But now when you're with a partner, you're naked, they're naked, everybody's naked, it's a big old naked party. If you're uncomfortable in these areas, it might play a role when you're with somebody else. Since we're on the topic of sad pee-pee, it could be all this stuff.
Damn.
How frequently do you crank that soldier boy? How do you crank that soldier boy? But what about escalation to more extreme and shocking content?
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
If something isn't in your wheelhouse, it probably wouldn't do much for you. There's probably some aspect of the material that's speaking to some aspect of your sexuality. I don't know exactly what that would be.
You have to look within yourself to save yourself from your other self. Only then will your true self reveal itself.
But what about the objectification? I don't think it's either or. People are still people no matter what. It's like, hey, I'm very naked, I'm very online, subscribe to my OnlyFans. It's really not that big a deal. If seeing a bunch of naked people makes you act gross and weird towards them, or if you only look at things that are degrading towards women, or you think it's all degrading towards women, that's on you. And maybe you have some unhealthy views about sexuality. This is eerily familiar to the whole notion that violent video games cause violence.
It's not our fault, it's just a game. It's not just a game. It's my life.
Is your conception of masculinity so fragile that you think men are completely at the mercy of their sex drives? Or if they choose to partake in certain sexual behaviors, that makes them weak? Fellas just can't catch a break. Here's my very important PSA. Sexuality is only a part of who you are. Don't let it define you. And this applies across the board. Your self-worth is not determined by who you have sex with, how many people you have sex with, how often you engage in sexual behavior, what kinds of sexual behavior you engage in, or even if you have sex at all. If someone judges you based on these things, they suck. Nobody cares what you do with your penis unless you break the law.
That's the sound of the police!
This is also why I haven't commentated on the practice of NoFap itself and the Fapstronauts. NoFap is typically aimed at young men who don't have a purpose, lack drive, discipline, good habits, who are then given a simple measurable goal they can achieve, which they can shape their identity around. It gives them a purpose and then provides them with momentum to go do other things that actually shape who they are and who they become. What's the word I'm thinking of?
I believe I was having the placebo effect.
Placebo.
Placebo.
It'll come to me. These Fapstronauts are reminiscent of the old atheist community that popped up in the late 2000s. People find a new identity and latch onto it. Now I see the world for how it truly is. We've gone from not believing in God to not believing in masturbation. Is that progress? I will say this though, there is a large role that shame and guilt can play, especially when it comes to sexual behavior. Where that comes from can depend on a lot of things, could be all this stuff. Damn. It can create this negative feedback loop that reinforces itself. You don't want shame to generate an unhealthy view of sexuality. Meanwhile, inside NoFapitopia, all roads lead to addiction. Did you stop? Good. Did you do it again? Oh no, you relapsed. Well, I guess that means you gotta do a NoFap. And I would see that frequently within the NoFap ecosphere because it seems like there's no part of this worldview where pornography or pornography use isn't harmful in some way.
Keep in mind that I was like a recreational abuser of porn. It didn't feel like an addiction. It just felt like a treat, something I was treating myself to, I suppose.
Even if it's not having any detrimental effects to your life, it's still causing brain dopamine problems.
The naturally occurring brain chemical involved in various functions.
When you release, as some like to put it, it's not like your whole body shuts down and you're unable to move. You probably don't want to do sex stuff for a little while, but you'll probably want to do other things. You can still move around afterwards. If you're hungry, you probably still go get food. That's how it works. Just your overall perspective and life context can shape how you feel post-release. It's the difference between feeling like this
Around me are familiar faces.
and feeling like this.
Put my whole arm in the rim, this cocky, and I know Poppy get a key for the party.
Could be that you're using pornography as a coping mechanism.
You're trying to cover up boredom, that anxiety, the stress, eating pornography.
And that's a symptom of an underlying problem in your life. For some people, removing this coping mechanism helps them face the problem head on. Other people, maybe not so much. I'm just a guy, I don't know your life. I was trying to make a dumb, entertaining video about stuff. That's pretty much it. I am declaring NoFap. I am done with NoFap. My final score, I don't want to offend God out of 10.
Allah the Almighty.
As for the rest of the dopamine stuff, there aren't really any dedicated detox videos on gambling or food or TV or drugs. The only other conceptual through line between these different activities is
humans have a tendency to compete. Survival of the fittest. Us as a tribe.
Something evolutionary psychology. We've been genetically programmed by our primitive hunter-gatherer Fred Flintstone caveman brain to seek out high calories, survive, and reproduce. We're supposed to be sitting around a campfire, but now in modern society we have too much Game Boy and French Toast Crunch. And uh-oh, everyone got fat. You're just making shit up. Evolutionary psychology is largely based on assumptions about prehistoric human life rather than evidence. It's an untestable narrative that you can just throw out there to explain why humans behave the way they do. This narrative is usually applied to food and sex, but never to like buildings and modern medicine. Where do you draw the line between natural and unnatural? Because when it comes to survival and reproduction, we've shaped the environment to suit those needs. So many things can be considered unnatural, from where we live to what we do to survive.
Business.
Personal fitness can be considered unnatural. Living in a city with millions of people, if you go out clubbing, you will encounter more hot babes or hot guys or hot whatever in one night than your ancestors would in several lifetimes. Plus, you have access to contraception. I've wiped my ass with more toilet paper than my ancestors ever have. You gotta look at the full picture. Take food for example. Whether somebody gains or loses weight is a matter of calories in versus calories out. And we have an abundance of calories in. The foods loaded with sugars and fats, they're more calorically dense, they taste better, and they're the least satiating. So you end up just going...
Wow, what a nice fella. Our brains are programmed to love high-calorie foods.
But your choices aren't limited between raw broccoli and like chocolate fudgy cake. There is a healthy middle ground where you can eat tasty, satiating food without breaking the bank on calories, so to speak. But what if you have a demanding job or other time-consuming responsibilities? If you've been working on the railroad all the livelong day, or sitting on your ass, coding some kind of code, wanting some quick and easy chicken nuggies would make sense. It's calories in, calories out. But if you don't have the time, the energy, or the resources in both departments, then the results may be less than ideal. I'm not saying it's impossible to have some semblance of a healthy lifestyle, but if your environment environment doesn't promote movement, then you might not move. I don't think the caveman brain story quite captures the full context. The thing that I've been alluding to this entire time is that with a dopamine detox, you're not supposed to take it literally, which kind of runs contrary to the name Dopamine Detox or Dopamine Fast. Some videos will explicitly tell you that this will not change your levels of dopamine, or that
your brain's not going to be neurochemically changed through doing this dopamine reset. There is no strict science that says that the wiring of your brain is going to be transformed in this process.
One of the guys who popularized the term, James Cameron Seppa, has said as much when being interviewed about the topic. The name is supposed to appeal to people, especially those who like brain hacking and all that crap.
Hackerman.
It's called a dopamine detox or a dopamine fast, or the marketing. I'm not sure if this is irony, but James Cameron Seppa got mad at the New York Times for covering some tech CEOs who took dopamine fasting quite literally, or as he puts it,
You freaking bricks! When will you learn? When will you learn that your actions have consequences?
it's a biased hit piece by a male bashing activist writer, and the source for that is notoriously unbiased Ben Shabibo of thedailywire.com. Personally, I found the discussion underneath the article more interesting than the article itself, but as a male bashing hit piece,
What are you talking about?
anyways, the irony part is that he really doesn't like the term toxic masculinity.
The unfortunate thing is you take a legitimate issue and you layer on the politics on top of that, and you call it toxic masculinity. And that in turn inherently has a implication or assumption that there's something inherent about masculinity that's toxic.
Even though the term is not about literally demonizing masculinity, instead he promotes the concept of tonic masculinity.
And that's what the meaning of the hashtag is. Tonic masculinity means that masculinity is good. It should be celebrated. We shouldn't be ashamed of being a man, because a lot of the traits that are intrinsically and cross-culturally associated with masculinity are positive and have done tremendously good things for society.
Men who are strong, caring, and compassionate. This is best exemplified by his Twitter, where he makes fun of the low testosterone men who don't conform to his ideals of masculinity. Do we have a word for that? But no, we mustn't use the term toxic masculinity. It's almost as if he's taking it literally, or if he isn't, he's worried that other people might. Kinda like how he used the term dopamine fasting to promote a practice, and some people took that term very literally, even though that wasn't what he intended. Is this ringing a bell? Anywho, you can read all about it in the style section of the New York Times. After going through all this hashtag dopamine detox content, I was left with the impression that mentioning dopamine wasn't necessary at all. Dopamine fasting could have just as easily been called cortisol fasting or androgynous opioid fasting, but that doesn't play as well to your target demographic.
Hackerman.
This is more so relevant to the self-help personal development improvement club, who are keen on motivation, so they focus on dopamine,
the motivating brain chemical.
Though it often gets used interchangeably with liking or pleasure.
Now this is what your brain does to reinforce behaviors. It provides you with chemicals that make you feel good.
Which is why it seems they're trying to solve a motivational problem with a hedonic solution by using discipline. Motivational problems are very Avril Lavigne. Appealing to neuroscience is a great way to make your arguments seem more convincing, and to make it seem as though you are the knowledge king.
I actually minored in neuroscience in college. Shut up!
Even though you're simplifying one complicated function of a complicated neurotransmitter among many complicated neurotransmitters, each with their own complicated functions, in a complicated brain and body filled with many complicated processes. It's an oversimplification that creates scientific misinformation about the brain and dopamine system, which has spawned a practice called dopamine fasting that has no empirical basis. So in essence, the whole thing is trendy pseudoscience. But hey, don't hate the player, hate the game. That's just the nature of these self-help personal development improvement club. Advice in this area is designed to be generic, easily understood, and widely applicable, whether you have specific goals or no life direction at all. Space! That's why you end up with this kind of vagueness.
Now, I used to want big things. I had a grand vision for myself. I wanted to have a clear picture of where I was heading, a grand vision that was difficult, that was bold, that would push me to my limit, and I wanted to be able to execute towards that goal on a day-to-day basis. I wanted to have that vision and know that every single day I was getting one step closer to that vision.
The basic concepts and principles remain the same, but it often gets repackaged in different flavors.
Remember Alf? He's back in pod form.
The Dopamine Detox is Alf. He's back in POG form. Disclaimer, I understand that these channels are trying to help other people through motivation, giving advice, practical tips, yada yada yada.
But you yada yada over the best part.
No, I mentioned the bisque.
They have hundreds of thousands of subscribers and followers. I have one, so what do I know? But that's why when you strip away all the dopamine stuff, the advice is some basic shit. So even though the scientific reasoning behind a dopamine detox is absolute bollocks, at best, it's okay.
The mustaches worked!
Do you know what that means?
Placebo.
Placebo.
Placido Domingo.
We are invincible!
You are tricking your brain, but not in the way you think. It's just managing your time and energy and reducing distractions so you can focus on whatever it is you want to focus on. Or if you just want to get away from all the techno junk for a while, that's called taking a break. Doing hard work will get easier when you don't have distractions, but hard work will still feel like hard work. If you have an aversion to doing something because of fear, stress, or overwhelm, your problem isn't dopamine, it's those things.
Early stages of hard work and focus are going to feel like agitation, stress, and confusion because that's the norepinephrine and adrenaline system kicking in. None of us would expect to walk into the gym and do our PR lift or a performer go do something without warming up. The brain also needs to warm up and start to hone in which circuits are going to be active.
Boring things are still going to be boring. Even the high stimulating activities get boring after a while. Ever sat through a boring movie before? One sentiment I frequently come across is, I used to read books, but ever since the internet happened, I can't read books. It's so hard for me to read books. Did you stop reading? If you stop reading, don't be surprised if it's hard to get back into it. I just thought it was common sense. If all your mental focus is directed at a tiny rectangle all day, you may not have the motivation or the energy to do a bunch of things.
And when you're bringing your visual attention to a very narrow point of focus throughout the day and repeatedly, you are exhausting your neural circuits and your capacity for focus. You only get so much of that to spend, so to speak, each day. And so if you're somebody who is thinking about creative projects, every time you're absorbed into your phone for a couple hours or 20 minutes or so, you're spending out powers of attention that can be spent on other things. So you can't do it all. You can't look at your phone all day and do all those other things.
This is anecdotal, but my brain can feel just as fried after a few hours of doing hard work as it would be after a few hours of doing YouTube or doing video game. I don't think it's because my dopamine receptors are being downregulated. I think it's because I'm tired. I rejuvenate myself by taking a break or doing something else. I never see these dopamine detox videos mention the ultimate dopamine detox. Go to sleep.
What may actually affect your dopamine? Sleep, diet, exercise.
Like, maybe I expected too much from a video trying to sell me a watch.
If you're going to be doing a dopamine fast, which means you're basically doing nothing all day, trust me, you're gonna end up wondering what the time is quite often, which means you need a watch.
Conceal screen because these stand out, they have expensive looking designs and the quality is top notch.
These dopamine detox videos will discuss addiction and mental health issues, but never mention seeking out therapy or help from a medical health professional. You can kind of tell where their priorities are at when the hashtag is mental health, but the resources are affiliate links.
The information contained on this YouTube channel are for educational and informational purposes only.
Even the Huberman Lab podcast, which is technically more science-based, is not medical advice. This video is not medical advice, but seeking help from an objective third party could potentially help you deal with some of your issues. If you are masking pain, depending on what that pain is, you may not be able to handle it by yourself. This does not make you a weak person. Everybody deserves compassion and empathy. All I'm saying is finding a good therapist can be beneficial. Or you can just use their affiliate links and then do dopamine detox hard mode.
And halfway through the day you decide to give up Because if you do decide to give up, no matter what mode you decide to do, you're now providing your brain with a ridiculous amount of evidence that you are addicted to dopamine and that you can't be disciplined.
It's not proof that you are addicted to dopamine if you do nothing all day, get bored, and then want to look at your phone. If you get bored, it means you need things to do. It's less so an addiction and more so you don't have any kind of direction. Merely cycling through different entertainment mediums in a digital environment can keep you physically and mentally stagnant. You can explore other areas that don't involve a screen. Nothing immediately jumps out to you, that's okay. It's about exploration. Try things, see what happens. If worse comes to worse, you can overcome your dopamine addiction by starting a business telling other people how you overcame your dopamine addiction.
I'm the founder of Time Theory.
Now, what happens to us when our life is a mess is that we've been indulging in too many stimulating things. Things like porn, drugs, junk food, and binge-watching shows all produce a huge amount of dopamine.
Your life is a mess because your donkey's been eating too much dopamine, even though your life could be a mess for a whole complex set of reasons. A dirty little not-so-secret about this kind of content is that it's entertainment. It's all entertainment. This video is entertainment. My secret formula has been X is complicated. Here's a pop culture reference.
Look! G.I. Joe, Transformers, Thundercats, He-Man! Yay! Those shows existed!
These content creators are presenting you with their perspectives and their values, with all their implicit biases caked in there as well. Random people on the internet can't solve your problems, myself included. You can learn some knowledge and apply it. At the end of the day, that's on you.
The power is yours!
While it's good to have some degree of stoicism and self-determination, sometimes things just suck and are beyond your control. Life is hard, being a human is hard, and there are no easy answers. Changing your habits is difficult. It takes more than just a day or two, as you are utilizing self-discipline and willpower. These are conscious choices unrelated to neurotransmitters which govern subconscious processes. That being said, don't be hopeless. Don't give up. You can do it. I believe in you.
Never give up. Never surrender.
You can do it!
Believe in me. Believe in the Kamina who believes in you.
Ironically enough, the best videos are the ones that don't mention dopamine at all, or very briefly. Wheezy Waiter and his spouse Wheezy Waitress have a bunch of videos where they stop using social media or stop eating sugar for like a month. These videos are fun and don't mention dopamine.
Beer.
Anthropomorphic Bicep Matt Deli has a bunch of videos on digital minimalism. He's a filmmaker who centers his channel around this philosophy, so it gets a pass. Neurotransmissions is a YouTube channel that contains an actual neuroscientist, and surprise, they don't talk about dopamine detox. Z Frank is pretty solid, and Folding Ideas is fine too, I guess.
And this isn't just about a dopamine fast for a couple of days or something like that.
They all end up preaching some kind of moderation anyways, so the core aspect seems to be mindfulness. Mindfulness is good. Oh, I'm endlessly scrolling on
insert website here
for hours and hours.
Why are you bored, tired, lonely, anxious, scared, procrastinating?
Is this a coping mechanism for some specific problem in your life? Do you have nothing better to do? How do you have this much free time? What are your deeper psychological needs? What is it about the activity that entices you? I generally like commentary and discussion, getting a wide variety of opinions on current events. Also memes. Like I mentioned earlier, these activities are easy to start and to do and not so easy to quit. So perhaps look at some mechanisms that create quit. I'm not trying to make a here's what worked for me the video because I recognize that everybody's different, but understanding in my mind when I reach the content threshold generates an actionable quitting behavior. To put it another way, give birth to that gorilla in your brain that tells you when it's time to stop. Meditation is good too, but not required. Anyways, in the spirit of science, here are my own personal limitations. First, I am not a science guy. I've had to rely on a lot of scientific sources for my information, which is why it's taking me so long. The science stuff is very outside my comfort zone. So, may have made some claims that aren't fully scientifically backed, might have made some mistakes. Shocker. If you're really interested in the topic of dopamine, you can do your own research. Though honestly, you'd probably be better off picking up a book on critical reasoning and trusting in the scientific experts instead of like internet marketers. Another limitation is that I am of the millennial generation. Technology today is different from when it was when I was growing up. I didn't want to get mired in a whole generational debate debacle sort of thing. Also, I'm not taking into account comorbidities or underlying conditions because how could I possibly know anything about that? Whatever privileges I have, knowingly or unknowingly, they exist. I've had to thread the needle on a couple different topics, so if at times you felt like this doesn't apply to your situation or doesn't take into account some kind of variable, you'd probably be right. My first video is over 2 hours of nonsense on a topic that was trending over a year ago. So what do I know? I'll probably call something like Dopamine Detox is dumb, and that's okay, otherwise known as lockdown madness. Anyway, that's it. That's the video.
It doesn't matter what comes, fresh goes better in life. With Mentos fresh and full of life, nothing gets to you. Staying fresh, staying cool. With Mentos fresh and full of life, fresh goes better. Mentos freshness, fresh goes better with Mentos fresh and full of life.
Mentos, the fresh maker.
It doesn't matter what comes, fresh goes better in life. With Mentos fresh and full of life, nothing gets to you. Staying fresh, staying cool. With Mentos fresh and full of life, fresh goes better. Mentos freshness, fresh goes better with I'm losing my mind!
Mentos, the fresh maker.